Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Select Board meetings called to January 23rd, 2025 at 6 p.m. Would everybody join me with a Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Item 3, approve the January 9th, 2025 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
First and second. All in favor? Public forum. This is an opportunity for anyone who wants to address the Select Board with any issue that is not on the agenda.
Chief Simeone's here to introduce one of our newer officers.
How's everyone doing tonight?
Very
Great.
well, thank you.
So as everyone's aware, we've had a few retirements this year and a few changeovers. So you've seen some new faces around, but probably haven't had a chance to meet the individual officers. So we had one working tonight. I wanted to bring him up and introduce him. Although he's new to us, he's not new to law enforcement. He's been around for a while. So this is Sergeant Dan Garcia. He was just promoted in July. And I'm going to let him come up and tell you folks a little bit about himself.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Like Chief said, my name is Dan Garcia. I've been here in Maine, working for Port now for 2 years. Chief Simeone was nice enough to promote me 6 months ago. Before that, I was with the NYPD for 13 years down there. Worked everything from foot patrol, sectors, anti-crime, and then my last 6 years there, I was with the Emergency Service Unit, which is the lead TAC team for New York City. And
You
then,
speak as quietly as your captain speaks.
oh, I'm sorry. How's that?
Hey, there you go.
That better?
He carries a big stick, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm not allowed to talk like that in public forums. But, yeah, and before that, I was a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. I served there from 2003 to 2011.
Wow.
Wow.
Family?
My immediate family's still back in New York, so up here in Maine, it's just my wife and I.
Yeah. Do you have any kids?
No, no kids.
Great.
Thank you for your service,
you've been here
both
for
to the
2
town
years?
and to the country. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. Yes, 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Sergeant Garcia is also part of the York County Special Response Team. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Right, so the York County, all the municipalities can participate in the Regional Special Response Team, SRT. Its formal name is Southern Maine Special Response Team. There aren't many of us there, maybe 20 or so active members at the time. But yeah, so I've been with them for about a year.
So this is a
helping out.
special team that can be called in for separate events or something?
Yeah, so it's basically a SWAT team for the county.
Right.
So, for example, yesterday morning, we served a high-risk warrant for MDEA in Sanford,
Yeah.
at around, I don't know when that was, 9 or 10 a.m.
Yep.
Wow.
So it does require additional time with the other officers as they form a group. And Sanford runs the financials for the operation, even though it's York County. But the SRT team was here during Prelude the past couple years this year as part of our public safety response. And Sergeant Garcia had an interest in joining. He really has a wide background that made him a great member of that team. And we were happy to provide that since the level of crime here is not as high as New York City. So
Well, you've seen a lot. How many years in New York City as a police officer? 13?
13.
Yeah, yeah. So you've seen a lot.
So you went through the whole COVID thing,
Yes.
all of that.
Yep.
Wow.
Just another reason I'm up here.
And we're very fortunate to have
We
you
don't
with
blame
us.
you.
And I thank you very much.
Yeah,
I
we're
appreciate
happy to
that.
have
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoy it as much as we do.
So far I have.
Good.
Thank you.
So before we move on, we've got our fire chief, Jay Everett, here, and he just came back from Ohio to inspect our truck, so I thought maybe he'd give you an update.
Good evening. Everything's really good with the truck. All the lines on the spec where all the stuff's there, and there's still more stuff to do, but it's gonna be in Kennebunkport the beginning of February for training with the factory rep. They'll be here for 3 days, both for Kennebunk and with Kennebunk's truck and ours. And we're gonna end up doing the training together to give all our people more opportunities to come to it for the operation, the care and maintenance of the truck, and things like that. Ours will look a little different. It's a different, it's white over red. Kennebunk's is as well, but they painted the ladder and things like that, and we didn't. But ours doesn't have any lettering on it. That was something that the dealer's gonna do. I actually hired somebody, but I pay the dealer to have it done. It's part of the price. But it looks really good.
Did Kennebunk get the same type of truck?
As far as operation and everything, the exact same truck. They're both 100-foot tower, mid-mount towers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What's the number gonna be?
It's probably gonna be Tower 14, because it's gonna be housed here, and that was what the ladder 14 was, the designation of the truck that was here years ago.
Yeah, okay, great.
So it's not like a boat, you can reuse the name, huh? The number.
We can, because we don't have one. There's, Kennebunk's is Tower 1, and so we weren't gonna do that because that can be confusing. So, anyway.
Does this one come with a dog?
Come with what?
A dog. I keep waiting for the
I
firehouse
thought you
dog.
liked cats.
I like
Yeah.
dogs too.
Dalmatians are a tough breed.
No, I don't care about a Dalmatian. We just
can
need a
be.
fire dog.
Yeah,
They can be
I'll
mean
give you
too. I
mine.
had one.
so, anyway.
Don't like them?
Thank
I'll
you.
be,
Thanks.
I'll be
Thanks.
sending out some pictures, and I'll share them with Lori, and she'll send them to you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
How
Cool.
exciting.
Anybody else? No? Is there anybody in Zoom land? Is their hands up?
No hands raised.
Okay. Moving on. Annual investment presentation by H.M. Payson. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. How's this? Good? Good for
Yeah.
sound? Okay, good. Well, it's great to be in front of all of you again. The beginning of a new year, I have the great pleasure to walk you through the portfolio of the town and the investment performance of that portfolio. I'm happy to take questions as I go, and also happy to take questions at the end, whatever you'd like to do. The headline is that the portfolio is in excellent shape. It's been a couple great years in the stock market. As you know, the stock S&P 500, or you might not know, has been up 25% for the last 2 years in a row. And this has been driven by a couple things: a better than expected economy, driven by inflation coming down and economic growth being pretty solid. And at the same time, there's been a lot of excitement, as you're probably aware, over stocks tied to artificial intelligence. Really, just about 7 to 10 stocks have been driving the stock market this last year in 2023. The good news is that many of those stocks have been in your portfolio and have been helping to drive returns. That's not because we made any sort of call on artificial intelligence, but our process is focused on picking high-quality stocks and with good characteristics, and many of those companies are these large-cap tech stocks. So let me start on page 1. You can see that the value of the town's portfolio is $2.1 million, and we've got about 75% in equity. That is the red and the orange parts of this pie chart. And that's really important because equities are going to be the long-term driver of this portfolio in terms of its growth. Equities, we think, offer the best potential to outpace inflation. And you're going to see in a couple slides the really nice growth that equities have provided the portfolio over the last 10 years. We've almost been managing the portfolio for 10 years for you all. Page 2 shows the performance. And just the way to read this is the gray lines are the asset classes that were invested in for you. Just below the gray lines, the white is a benchmark that we use to manage, see if whether we're adding value versus the market. And then at the bottom of the page, there's a benchmark for the total portfolio and your total portfolio performance. So just to go over the last year, the second column in, if you look at the bottom, the town's portfolio is up 21.9% versus 14.8%. And then if you go 2 lines up, you can see our stock picking performance was up the stocks that we picked were up 28.8% versus 25% for the S&P 500. And this was in a market where it's very difficult to beat the S&P 500 because, as I mentioned, only 7 to 10 stocks were driving the overall market. And then if you look longer term, you can see the portfolio returns have outpaced their benchmark, whether we're looking at 3 years, 5 years, or since inception. I'll say since inception, the portfolio has advanced 9.6% versus 8.3% for the benchmark. So some really nice absolute returns and also good relative returns for you versus the benchmark over the last year and since inception. Turning to the next page, you can see graphically the growth in the value of the account and why having equities is the major portion of your investments has been great. That blue mountain is the growth in the value of the account since inception, and that maroon line is the money that's come in or out of the account over time. And you can see that despite yearly withdrawals, you have a nice upward growth of the portfolio. The numbers to the lower right also tell the story. You started with 1.1 million in February 28th of 2015. You've taken out about 362,000 since then, but your portfolio has gained 1.3 million, so you're now at $2.1 million. We turn to the next page. So the question is, how did we achieve this? It's really our same philosophy, which is we're looking for high-quality stocks, the companies that have competitive advantages, that are growing, generating a lot of cash flow, and are paying good dividends and growing those dividends. We're trying to find those companies at valuations that are at or below the S&P 500. In the upper left here, you can see that the S&P 500 is trading at 23.6 times in terms of valuation. So that's relatively high when you look at the versus history. The portfolio is slightly under that at 23.3. But then if you look at a few lines down, you can see the return on invested capital is nearly 12% for your companies versus 9% for the S&P. And that's a measure of the returns that these companies are getting, and it's a measure of quality. So you're getting much higher quality companies in our view for a multiple that's slightly less than the S&P 500. And then I'll just go to the next page or two here and stop for questions. We don't try to have companies in every sector of the S&P 500. We just try to go where we can find these high-quality companies, and that leads us to be in certain sectors and not in other sectors. On the left-hand side of this page, you can see the sector breakdown. The maroon line is the sectors. Maroon lines are the sectors weights, for the town's portfolio. The blue is the sector weight for the S&P 500. You can see we're overweight technology companies, healthcare companies, communication companies, industrial companies, and some energy companies. And then if you want to take some time, you can look at the center of this page, and that shows you the returns and margins available for each sector in the S&P 500. And the ones that are shaded green are the ones that are above average. So you tend to see us invested in the sectors that have higher than average returns and margins. And then lastly, I'll stop on the next page, which is the top 10 holdings in your portfolio. I mentioned artificial intelligence as a driver of the stock market, or stocks that are levered to artificial intelligence as a driver of the market over the last 10 years. Again, we haven't consciously gone out looking to invest in artificial intelligence, but we've owned many of these companies. Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Broadcom, NVIDIA, and Meta platforms in one way or another are tied to artificial intelligence. We're trying to be very careful in monitoring these positions, and to be honest with you, even though they have had these huge runs, these are tremendous companies generating good earnings. They have very defendable business models, and so we still have major positions in these companies. And then lastly, if you look at the fifth column over, sorry, just stay on that page, that's okay. The earnings growth of the stocks in the portfolio, if you can see they're down at the bottom of the fifth column, the total portfolio. If you were to look at the earnings of these companies over the last 5 years, they've grown at 16% per annum versus 10% for the S&P. And they've grown their dividends, which is one column to the left there, at 10% versus 6% for the S&P. So a very high quality, a group of high quality companies that are growing their earnings faster than the market, their dividends faster than the market. They're trading for a little bit less than the market. We're very happy with the portfolio. We are spending more of our time now, quite frankly, looking at the bottom 490 companies in the S&P 500 because they've gotten left behind. And so we've been adding some things there. But I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Any questions?
Looking good.
Yeah. You guys have done a great job, fantastic job for us in the last 10 years.
Great, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have managed the town's funds, and we enjoy having you as a client, and we'll keep pedaling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. Thanks.
Thank you.
So the result of, we do have two different funds invested. The pick of it, which was left to the town for police and public health equipment expenses, but the Kittredge Fund was the larger of the funds, and that was left to us to manage and then pay out on an annual basis to the 4 fire companies. So Nicole, do you want to tell people what the payout this year is
Yep.
to each of the companies?
So annually, we take a 3-year rolling average, and we pay out 4% of that. So our payout this year for the 4, between the 4 fire companies will be a total of $40,383.28. And we will be sending out those checks tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you're gonna be paying the fire companies soon? Is that what you just said?
Yes.
Okay. Presentation of proposed June 2025 ordinance changes. I don't see it.
We have the assessor first. Number 6.
I thought you
Oh.
said,
Okay. Discussion of assessors finding, pardon me. 6, discussion of assessors findings regarding Kennebunkport Biddeford line.
Yes, I am back again to the Biddeford Kennebunkport line. So, kind of as an update, I went out and visited the property. We had some questions about the property straddling a town boundary, and I had reached out to other assessors in Maine saying, has anybody had this issue before, and how did you solve it? And there was no response, but we did end up finding a court case from 1860 that suggested that when a house straddles a town boundary, that the most useful or most necessary and indispensable part of the house, wherever that is located, that is where the property will be assessed. The court case did not say what the most necessary and indispensable part of a house is. So we kind of mulled that over a little bit to try to figure out what could be. So we concluded the kitchen, because you have to eat, and I suppose people could eat outside. But anyway, so we went with the kitchen. I went out on January 16th to the house, measured to the best of my ability on the ground because I'm not a surveyor, I don't have GPS, and went into the house. The kitchen is in Kennebunkport.
Good.
So, so what I'm proposing at this point is to probably compose a letter, possibly, to the city of Biddeford, to let them know that, as long as you guys approve it, to say that we accept the 1978 line as surveyed. And though the house straddles the line because the most necessary part of the house is in Kennebunkport, we will continue to assess the house in Kennebunkport. Don't know if Biddeford will agree to that, or if that's the avenue that the board wants to take, but I think that will probably, hopefully, maybe be the easiest.
or at least you have some documentation.
We do.
So you
We,
you
yes,
have that
yes.
to stand on.
And I don't know the necessary and indispensable part, if that could be argued, though reading deeper into that court case, it also discussed some outbuildings that in the particular case of the 1860 house, there was a house that was built on the line, but there were several outbuildings also, but they all were, they were all in the one town. So they also took into consideration how many buildings were on the property. So I did take the initiative to look at the survey that the new owners of 8 Cloverleaf Farm had done, just to kind of see where the outbuildings lied. The majority of the outbuildings are in Kennebunkport, with the acceptance of the 1978 line. There is one building that would now fall completely into Biddeford, and that is an outbuilding. It's a barn with a garage and a lean-to attached to it. So that would be one building if, however Biddeford wanted to do it, they could possibly gain that one building and assess that one building. But the house and the majority of the buildings are in Kennebunkport. So that's where we're leaning.
That sounds good.
That's great.
Do we
Were
need a
there any other rooms in the house that, besides the kitchen, or just the kitchen?
Oh, no, there are other rooms
I
in the
mean,
house.
that- no, but I mean,
Yes,
that were
the
on our side.
major living areas of the house, Kennebunkport. There's a master suite that was in Biddeford. So if you went up the stairs, the master suite in the older part of the house was in Biddeford. Yeah, so,
What's the,
have any
I
questions?
think we need a motion if we're gonna accept it.
I don't know how to
I,
make,
How do you want to
I
word
was-
it? I
yeah,
certainly think
that's-
we ought to
Well,
do
can-
what was suggested by
Correct.
Becky,
Yeah.
to write the letter.
okay, visited 8 Cloverleaf Farm. I make a motion that 8 Cloverleaf Farm, even though the property straddles Biddeford and Kennebunkport, we find that the kitchen being the dominant room, we want to keep it on the Kennebunkport side.
And you're willing to adopt the 1978 boundary?
And we're adopting the 1978 boundary.
Mm-hmm.
18, yeah.
1978.
1970, yeah.
Any
can I
more
just ask,
discussion?
can I just ask one, so if Biddeford decides to fight it, can we hold back on the approval of the 78 line, pending their approval
Yeah,
of
we
keeping?
would make sure that everybody's in agreement
Okay.
before
Right.
we took any other action.
Yeah.
So I have a first and a second. I mean, I don't have a second. I'm waiting for
I'll
a second.
second that.
First and second, any more discussion on this?
Just one more quick one, just to refresh us. This was the only property that straddled if we accepted the 1978 line, right?
Yeah, that's the only property that has a house on it. There's one other property that would lose, some acreage would now go into Biddeford, but there's no house.
And the
There-
Conservation Trust land.
Yes, and the Conservation Trust also has some land that straddles the line as well, but it's just the land, so they would get, and they're tax exempt anyway, so Biddeford can't assess the Conservation Trust anyway, so they're an exempt entity. And I did speak to the other owners of the other property about the acreage, but their house is in Biddeford, they just have like back land that abutted the town boundary line. So there will be more acreage for them, actually, in Biddeford, yes, because we're moving it this way, yes.
Are they paying Kennebunkport
They are paying a
taxes?
portion based on the acreage that is in our town.
Kennebunkport, so they'll pay
Right.
less Kennebunkport tax.
Correct. We'll make the adjustment to the land size, and then their assessment would drop a little bit, but
Do
it's
we
land
have
only.
residents who are going to lose land to Biddeford, and that might impact them?
Lose land to,
Isn't that
So I
what we
mean,
just
if
said?
you move the line west,
yeah.
right?
mhm.
the line
So,
comes
yes,
west,
more,
Are there people who are currently have property that they believe is in Kennebunkport is now gonna move over into Biddeford?
yes.
And will that have any negative impact on them? Even though it's not a
It's
building?
just land, the one owner that I
It's just
spoke
the
to,
one.
it's just land only.
Okay.
So it's their back field. So I don't see where it would really hurt anything if they wanted to develop the back acreage. They'd have to come in from Biddeford anyway. If they decided that they wanted to put something on the Kennebunkport side, there would have to be some sort of access. They couldn't just put a house or a structure back there.
Let me ask that question a little
yeah,
differently. I
okay,
think what David was asking is,
okay.
everything you have mentioned in terms of examples, there's no other area. Everywhere else, the line is the same. It
Correct.
hasn't moved.
Correct,
So, great.
right, yes,
So except for those things that you have already mentioned,
yes,
it's no effect on anyone.
correct.
Okay. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
for all the
welcome.
work on this, too.
Oh, no problem.
Very nice.
Keep us posted as to how Bedford
Yeah,
reacts, please.
I will. Fingers crossed.
Now we'll do 7. Presentation of proposed June 2025 ordinance changes. There he is up in the corner, hiding. Hey, you're
Limping.
doing well, though.
Galen,
No
is it-
crutches?
Is
That's
it
good.
easy, is it easier for you to sit?
Chester.
Yeah, I have to elevate my leg, but yeah.
Yeah, why don't you have
Why
He's
don't you
been
just
sitting too much
Oh,
I've been
today.
sitting too much, yeah.
just
It's good. It's
keep
good
moving
to-
your leg?
Yep. So good evening, Board. Tonight, I'm here to discuss 2 ordinances with you. I believe Nadia did give you a pretty thorough briefing at the last meeting. I was attending virtually. I thought she covered a good swath of information. I'm just here to offer any clarifying information you might have regarding the floodplain ordinance. And again, that section is just, we're adding the provisions in there for the AO zone that is missing when we adopted the LOMAR. That letter of map revision, that's what the LOMAR stands for. And so that is just applying to areas that have a lot of sheet flow within the 100-year floodplain. Those AO zones were existing prior to the adoption of the FEMA flood maps. So it's not increasing the flood area, it's not increasing the amount of whoever in town from getting additional flood coverage. It's just putting standards back into the ordinance to help people in new development opportunities to know what they have to meet rule-wise to comply with FEMA's insurance requirements.
Do you have anybody have any questions for Galen?
Galen, when I read through it, I don't know if it's this or the next session, so just tell me to hold off if I need to. But in some of the changes for new builds, they had some comments in here about sloping the land. So I couldn't find anything about retaining the water on your property. Is there, so for example, if somebody's doing this and then they have a low-sitting house next door to them, is this gonna flow everything to that neighbor, or?
Yeah, again, what FEMA's looking at here is they are looking at elevating the structure for risk. They're not dealing with stormwater management, how that all works. That would be your other town regulations. So that can happen. And another practice that is in our FEMA regulations right now, and it's something that some coastal towns, especially down south, are looking to exempt, is the practice of what's called fill-in. And so what they would do is they bring topsoil from other areas, and they help to raise the structure in a more cost-effective manner. But when you do that, you're causing more of an elevated hill. And so now the floodwaters, which normally would just go pass through, they're now going over and impacting neighbors a lot more heavily. And we've seen some properties in town that they've done that practice, and it has impacted adversely the neighbors next door.
So does this make it, so do we have to adopt some other things to alleviate that? Did we walk into the same issue now with this?
Yeah, we did not touch that topic in this section. And that's something we can address in the land use ordinance if it's something that we are seeing a prevalent issue.
So I'm thinking of like when we run in, we have some streets that don't have the right, have no change in elevation for drainage. And as soon as somebody starts raising up, even putting a driveway in that's a little bit higher, all of a sudden we've got areas in the streets and stuff where we're getting some flooding that doesn't go anywhere because there's no movement.
Yep. That happens. I mean, that happens even if we look at public roads and raising up those as well for climate resiliency. There's times where that happens, and we have to put stormwater infrastructure in. So it does happen.
These are things that would be addressed during the planning board,
Yep.
wouldn't they? So that's something that, we just need to be clear that comes up, that concern is,
Yep.
Well, no, because we don't have any ordinance that mitigates it, or that's anything. I guess what I'm getting at is I completely understand where we're going with this. My question is, do we need to do something else on an ordinance for water handling, to somehow mitigate it a little bit? And I don't know if it's possible at all. But I don't think, as we stand today, I don't think the planning board would actually take this on because there's no ordinance or anything to cause them to ask those questions.
Under the site plan review process, the planning board does have the jurisdiction to review stormwater management and require stormwater management They can request that to see what pre and post development is. But you're right, it only impacts certain developments. It doesn't impact just single-family homes.
Yeah. that's what
And that's something that the Growth Planning Committee is working on. We're looking at stormwater standards, and it's something that we want to do it right. So we're not happy with what the current language is. We want to do more research and make sure that we're doing our due diligence before we bring the draft language in front of you. So I think it's going to be a future amendment. It's going to probably happen maybe next November for the ballot, but we're working on those standards.
You're welcome, John. Anytime. Every now and then I help.
All set? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next one, I believe, is the land use ordinance changes. And there were some questions that were relating to shoreland zoning as it relates to trees, replanting requirements. I did reach out to Maine DEP, and so I did get a response to them about having an exemption for replanting requirements under utility lines. I wanted to go back a little bit for the board just to educate a little bit on what replanting requirements would look like in our shoreland zoning ordinance. So between anything less than 75 foot from the normal high water line in a water body, so for a coastal wetland, that's at the 7-foot elevation above sea level. That would be where you would start that 75-foot back. Trees in that area would be calculated in a 25 by 50-foot block area by the code enforcement officer. So trees that are removed in that area are based off a point system, and based off that point system, and that's based off the diameter of the tree, they would have so many trees to replant. Extending past that 75-foot mark, and you're going further now. So shoreline zoning is 250 feet from the normal high water line. So past 75 feet, but to 250, that area in there, in your current shoreline zoning ordinance, you are allowed to remove within that 25 to 50-foot block area, 40% of the canopy within a 10-year period. So again, I know there was questions about, well, I have this tree, what do I do? I'd say it is on a case-by-case basis. We would look at that, because maybe based off that block of area, you might be fine to take down that tree and not replant. So I wanted to address that because I did talk to Maine DEP about this. He said the same thing. It depends on the location where we're talking about with this tree, hypothetically, and granting an exemption. Because there might be, in this situation, that they're fine. The ones that are underneath the power line, they might be far enough back from that 75-foot line, and you could cut down that tree and not have to replant. Take it down to the stump, grind down the stump, and leave the roots, keep it stabilized, and you don't have to replant. So I think there's provisions in here already that offer some leeway if people are looking or concerned about hazard trees on their property. And that's what Maine DEP's interpretation is as well.
Yeah, I think I was the person that raised these questions, and I think so I'm glad to hear that. I think we need to give homeowners flexibility to maintain their property and make sure that their property's safe. So
Yep.
that's good. So I got to digest what you said a little bit more. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot out in the field that the code officer has to handle in managing. Shoreland zoning is complicated, especially in Goose Rock's beach area where you have a lot of non-conforming lots, tight building envelopes, and a lot of little obstacles along the way, frontal dunes to deal with. So there's a lot to it, to look at development and look at what people want to do to make things work. But I will say that the code officers, they're pretty good at coming up with solutions to try to figure out how we can make this work for property owners. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, there are some provisions that are missing. I was out for surgery. There were missing provisions that the GPC has discussed, and it relates to shoreline zoning, especially your use standards, and it's something that the town solicitor also agrees we need to help clarify. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that there will be new language that you might see from the town solicitor and ourselves to help clarify our ordinance, to understand the meaning and intent a lot better. So I just want to give you that heads up ahead of time. But if there's any other questions I can answer, I'm happy to help.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I think I just want to state again, when I read these over, I look in the view of, at some point in our life here, we allowed people to have property and houses down in the shoreland, and I understand the preservation needs and requirements. But, and I appreciate, you know, the feedback that you got from the DEP and then what the town's trying to do. But that's sort of the lens I look at when I go through this, like replanting vegetation, making sure things are away from foundations, making sure that the home itself is gonna be able to be maintained in a level that the person's gonna be safe, secure, and they're not, you know. So that's when I'm reading through these things, that's how I'm viewing it.
Yep. I think the town historically, like, we have worked with people in the past. You remember the one consent agreement, administrative consent agreement. The standards that we were using are actually what are being proposed here right now. And we were using it as our way of, instead of him having to replant, he could just let it naturally grow and see if the canopy would restore. And so those provisions are still in there, that we did as part of the consent agreement with the owner. So we want to work with the owners to try to restore the canopy and meet the same objectives as possible.
Thanks, Galen.
Yep, absolutely.
Item 8, discussion of waste tipping contract.
Yeah, so in your packets, we have the contracts that EcoMaine gave us last Friday when we went on a tour of their facilities. And those contracts would be if we wanted to become an owner community. I also included a short presentation that the executive director gave us as well. We have today received the proposed draft, I would call them contracts, if we just want to be a contractual community. And so I gave those to you as well tonight. We have sent this all to the town attorney, and she is reviewing that information, and will be coming back to you with her advice as well. Alan, I believe, is going to take a tour tomorrow. Yep. And so we'd like to go through that process, and based on our conversation last Friday with EcoMaine, I believe we can wait until February to make a decision.
Okay, good.
I don't know if anybody, Eric's here, has any other questions or comments or thoughts that they want to share or other information we're seeking.
My one comment would be, and Ellen and I discussed this, if we don't participate in the program, or if we wind up doing a contract, what worries me is at the end of the contract, will EcoMaine then allow us to continue with them? And with the way the trash situation is going, it's harder and harder and harder to get rid of trash. I'd like to see us become the member as opposed to the contract, because I don't want to see us in 5 years not having a place to go. So that would be my comment.
So my comment would be that, you know, Lori gave us a 30-year contract from EcoMaine to look over.
It doesn't say 30 years in it, I noticed. It says to be determined, but this was the sample he sent me.
Okay, but will they or will they?
He has continued to say that it's 30 years, but I looked at it when I got it, and it doesn't say 30 years in the contract. It says to be determined.
Okay,
And it's the board that has to make the final decision, their board.
okay. So I would say from my point, I read through the Joyner contract, and the part that stuck out to me was the liabilities of the city and town, 6.1. And I'll just quickly go through it. It says the following Joyner, city, town shall be liable under the interlocal agreement for the proportion share of liabilities incurred by the EcoMaine during the term of this policy. I'm ad-libbing a little bit, I skipped down. The liabilities for which the city, town has ongoing liability include but are not limited to: number one, closure of the post-closure costs for the solid waste disposal facilities owned and operated by EcoMaine, including the landfill, ashfill, and waste-to-energy facility. Number 2, unknown costs resulting from liabilities incurred by EcoMaine during the membership period, including but not limited to liabilities related to the solid waste disposal facilities incurred prior to closure. The proportional share to be contributed by the city town shall be determined and allocated on the basis set forth in Section 8 of this agreement, which there isn't, in Section 8, they don't spell it out. But I think that's where I'm not with Sheila on this, because I understand that we want to have a contract. If we can't procure a contract from our town for waste disposal, there's a much bigger problem going on in Maine, and maybe other states too. I know that there's, according to what the information we were given, EcoMaine has 22 members right now and 54 contracts. So they, I would assume per their business model, they need to maintain those contracts. So I can't get over the liability part of this that we would be walking into from a town's perspective, if I'm reading this correctly and understanding it.
I think they have a reserve account, don't they? If they run into a problem?
They do have some reserve funding. They have 17 million, I think, set aside for landfill closure, and some additional reserve accounts that I think it totals a little over 26 million from their last audit. But let's see what the attorneys say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just sent her the new contracts so we can have a fuller picture of that. And I think Alan is gonna see it tomorrow, and then we'll come back in February.
Okay, that sounds good. Any more questions, though? All set? Okay, appoint Thomas Smith to the Growth Planning Committee with an expiration date of June 30th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
First and second, all in favor? Okay. Proposal on committee reporting. I'm going to pass that over to you.
Okay, so I had gone through the memos in your packet. I can't find it right now, but it's in your packet. No one had provided me any changes. I'm just reaching out to the rest of the board to see if anybody had any changes you wanted made to that process.
That was good.
I think it's fine the way it is.
Okay, so then,
Down on page,
What page is this?
I don't even know.
it's on page 148.
Oh,
I don't know how to get there.
we'll get there.
All right, so I would, I guess I would make a motion then to accept this new process as written, as recorded.
Second.
I have a first and second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
And we'll start that relatively soon. We've reached out to some already, scheduling those, have we not?
Yes, I reached out to the chairs of the committees. I've heard from, I would say, majority of them. I would say that first meeting in February, second meeting in February, March, a lot of those meetings are already taken. We try to spread them to have two committees per meeting, just so you don't get overwhelmed.
But it will
And-
start in February. I guess
Correct,
it's
first
like
meeting in
so it'll
February,
start in
yes.
February.
And I send them the guidelines based on what Mary Beth proposed.
Perfect.
Okay, other business. David,
I have no other business tonight, Alan.
Mary Beth?
Yes, I do. John and I and Lori met with the Town Hall Committee for our discussion from our last board, and we've been starting on that process. But the committee had asked us to come back and actually formally get a motion approved from the board, because we just had a conversation. Everybody said, yeah, go ahead, but we never took the vote. So they'd like us to formally approve that direction and then get it recorded in the minutes.
Okay,
Okay, so I will make the motion. So the motion is that the Board of Select approve the Town Hall Committee recommendation to do the next level design on the Town Hall proposal at the fire station site, and also start the work to attain a detailed cost estimate, and also work to address any concerns brought forward by the public at this date.
that's your motion?
That's the
Do I
motion.
have a second?
John, did you want to
Second.
change something?
No,
Okay.
well, Yeah, maybe to explicitly say the public comments on drainage issues and on traffic were two of them that were explicitly stated as to be looked into appropriately and worked with. So,
That's a good clarification.
yeah,
Yep, good.
Thank you.
That's
And
your
I
addition?
second
That's the addition, that's the amendment.
So those will be addressed also
that. Explicitly.
during this.
And if any others come up,
Yeah,
but
okay.
those were explicitly stated, and we want to take them seriously
Yep.
and run them to ground.
I think the drainage issue
It's major.
is an issue for the people.
And Eric's done a tremendous job. He presented that during the committee meeting, and there's just a lot of solid work that's going to make a real difference in the neighborhood, whether or not we move ahead
Yep.
with the town hall here.
Okay.
Okay, the first and second, any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Okay, John, was that all you had, Mary Beth?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
More
ahead.
business?
So my other one was a question, is when will we start getting, when will you guys be ready to come back to us and talk about the disposal change with the,
The
like,
trash, the
yeah,
trash.
how we're communicating it and,
Yeah.
you know, the plan and just sort of, so we can start getting a.
You're talking about the
Garbage
bins,
cans.
the bins,
Moving
not
to
eco-man,
automated.
okay.
The bins.
Yeah, moving
the
to
bins.
automated. As you know, the rollout date is in March.
May.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is in May. Very good, I'm glad you're
Thank
here.
you.
And so in the February timeframe, we're going to be developing the communication strategy and how that would move forward. And I imagine that would begin in the latter part of February and into March.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more,
Go for it,
sorry.
go for
I
it.
just thought of it.
Don't be sorry.
So this is, when Alan gave me the tour of the pier a while back, we have, do we have any opportunities to get a recycling dumpster there? Because there, you know, there were some mixed garbage that comes, you know, from the fishermen. So I think there's two things, you know, are we gonna sort of keep these things in a secure area so we just, you know, don't have various things going into the dumpsters? And it's for the pier workers themselves in the boats there? And is
Has
there
there
a way?
been a problem? I mean, those dumpsters have been there for quite a while. Maybe there's been a problem, that they've been abused in some way, or?
They've had some issues, they've had people coming from different homes and whatnot and dumping their trash in the dumpsters. Maybe when we
go
get
to
everything
one.
all squared off, maybe we can put a camera there or something, I don't know.
Well, is there, I don't know the design, is there a shed, or are they
No.
out in the
No,
open?
just out in the open.
It
Just
was
as
out,
they
it
are
was
now.
out, it's right in the open.
Yeah, as they are now.
There was no place
Listen,
else to put
I
it.
have people who come to the dumpster at the room.
I'm sorry I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you
So,
give us
I
a
mean,
list of where these
people are gonna do
dumpsters
it no
are?
matter.
Exactly.
So, you know, so I guess the question is, is there any opportunity to get a recyclable dumps? I don't know if there is such a thing.
I would really, I'd be concerned that could so easily become contaminated.
Yeah.
And that the product would then work against us. I mean, it's a big dumpster, people are gonna throw other things that aren't recyclable or wish cycling in it.
Most of those bags and boxes, they still have fish remnants in them.
Yeah,
Products.
Yeah,
Yeah, so they're trash, technically.
They're trash.
I think the pier is gonna be mostly trash, except for the chowder house at the
There you
Buffalo,
go.
if we can do that, to have recyclables there.
Yeah, I did see a whole bunch of plastic tubs, and that's what I thought that could go.
Yeah.
But I hear you, I just didn't
It's-
know if it was an
it's-
opportunity.
I-
I'm good, I
Yeah,
just
But
wanted to
thank
throw it
you,
out there.
thank you for thinking about that.
I'm just trying to think, John, just thinking through
Well, you
things.
always
I'm done now,
Okay.
officially done.
I've
John?
nothing, I've nothing, thank you.
I'm good.
Ma'am?
Yeah, so Eric and I had a meeting with the engineers of Woodard and Kern today to talk about the Ocean Avenue project. As you remember, you agreed to fund the continued design of that project so we could apply for FEMA funding to potentially raise the road. So one issue that developed is that apparently the Wanby Beach area, as well as that small area that flooded out right before the Walker's Point, are both mapped as coastal dunes.
Go figure.
And so, because they are mapped as coastal dunes, we have applied for a National Resource Protection Act permit. So NERPA permits are granted by DEP. DEP has said that because it is a coastal dune area, we cannot have the wave wall, and we can't have the parking area there,
Really?
really, because it cannot, it's not required in the dune area, and it can't be higher than the elevation of the road. So we discussed it with the engineers today, and they gave us three options. One was to argue that point. Another was to try to raise the road without the wave wall, and just, we won't have the wave wall, and we'll have parallel parking,
Okay.
parking on the shoulder of the road. And then the third option was to not do anything. So,
We not do anything means.
Just let it
Parking's important.
as is, stays as it is.
Right.
so what I said was that I would like to have our staff geologist take a look at that. And so I reached out to Selectman Dykstra. We're gonna have a meeting on Monday morning. Pete Slavinsky is the one who mapped it, and he is also the one who determines whether we can build there. And so I wanted to get his opinion on whether this is a battle worth fighting or not, or whether there is logic to this, because when I heard it, I said, what? So I just want to update you on that. We'll be coming back to you with an update once we have more information and if we have to change directions on that.
So, Laurie, who designated it as a dune?
Pete Slavinsky is the main DEP coastal geologist, coastal geologist.
Could he have made a
And he
mistake?
is responsible for mapping and monitoring the dunes up and down the Maine coast.
So where is the dune?
So could,
Well, the dune, a dune can be defined as, well, a beach can be defined as gravel or sand. Certainly even small cobbles. There's the Hunter's Beach up on Acadia. It's just gorgeous, but they're fist. But at any rate, that's a beach, and so I hear that. But how one builds a stone dune, rocks, so it's a matter of definition. And I'm not saying that Pete is a very, very bright and capable geologist, and I'm not a marine geologist or coastal geologist, but I'd like to hear his reasoning and just to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah,
Because,
I get it.
yeah, there are reasons to protect dunes. There are reasons to have walls so that you don't get the energy gouging out. Well, Kennebunk Beach is case in point.
Right.
And so, okay, I get that, but this rock, and maybe that's his point, that rock could be washed out, well, so what? It would go to granite. Granite's beneath it. So I don't get the consequence issue that would prevent us from protecting our road. But that's up to him to tell us.
Okay.
And unfortunately, he mapped it and he decides, so that's
Yeah.
kind of it.
So one of the options, though, is that we still could raise the road, we just can't have the wall for the parking area.
Further out, pushing down.
Yeah, do you want to talk to it?
That's okay, I got it, I was just confused.
There's a couple of dynamics in place. So if we were to raise the road, it would actually be higher than the design that we were looking for originally. So that's the proposal from the engineers. We could raise the road, have not as much of a footprint, have possibly parallel parking, if that was approved by the DEP.
We wouldn't have parking, we would have a shoulder.
shoulder,
Upon which people
a
could stop
safety
permanently.
shoulder.
Right, maybe I should be clear about that. But that was really the intent would be that, so the energy that comes up, as we talked about run-up, wave run-up, we don't want that cobble to land on the road again. That was really kind of the objective of the wall. Provide a structure, we'd run up, hit the wall, that energy would be dissipated back. So that was the original design. Now what they're saying, what the engineers are proposing, well, if we go that route, we stay within the footprint we're looking at, then that run-up would be there, but there'd be no wall, so that mechanical component that would stop the energy would no longer be there, and there's potential that it would still come up. It would still, the road would be higher, you'd still have some resiliency, but you wouldn't have that engineered design that they had to try to resist some of that. And you would not have the parking perpendicular parking that we have now.
So when you guys talk on Monday and stuff, I guess part of the wall for me wasn't so much the parking, it was to keep the water from going underneath the road like we saw and wearing over time, and then doing that massive buckling, where then when we looked through the hole, there was nothing underneath the road. So I guess that would be, I just would need to understand, like, if we raise the road up higher and there's nothing to stop literally the water from getting underneath. I guess that would
But there
just
would be, I think it would still be built, if we raised it, we would still have large granite riprap.
Right, we would have a lot of revetment, and
Yeah.
it's still there.
Yeah.
However, the idea behind the original design was to have what was called a wave wall, right? To stop that velocity zone, right? They consider a velocity zone because of the wave action that comes in. So the idea was to stop that wave action with a wave wall. So now, is it,
And the wall was what allowed the road not to be raised as high up.
Right.
the road would
Wall
actually be
would kind of
below,
act as
the road would be below that
Right,
wall.
so this way would almost be to raise it to the height of where we thought the wall was going to be.
Yes.
Exactly.
But now the waves can run up the slope.
Right.
And the riprap doesn't necessarily, so my interpretation, to your point, Eric, was that the wave wall was gonna absorb the energy. The riprap, while it may absorb some energy, it doesn't completely absorb the energy, and over time, and over years. So I would see this, I may be completely wrong, so that's why I just need to understand when you guys are done thinking through this. There's the riprap, there's the riprap eventually, 5-10 years, we're away, and we're back where we would want to be able to repair to make sure that we don't get road damage. That's
But you,
just,
but you may wanna replace the riprap, you may need to put in more stone over time, that certainly.
That happens. So if you looked at the Kennebunk side of the beach, that riprap needed to be replaced.
Yeah, so you just-
And so it's almost a maintenance component. That action that happens there will remove three-ton rocks.
It's amazing.
It's incredibly strong. So we do have to keep an eye on that riprap because the DEP will let us replace what's there. But it does require maintenance.
So I don't want to get too far ahead.
Yeah.
nope,
Yeah,
we're good.
yeah.
No, I
But
think,
I just wanted to make you aware that we've hit a bump in the road,
Okay.
okay.
Bump in the road.
a bump in the Ocean Avenue Road.
I'd like to move to.
I'm
Well,
not done yet.
Not done.
We're not done yet?
I have been very good these past 6 months.
Certainly have.
You have.
So I just want to say we had the opportunity to talk to two of our public safety groups tonight, and we're very thankful for the work they do every day, keeping our citizens safe. Today, I had the opportunity to witness one of our front counter clerks come to the rescue of a neighbor. And our front counter clerk, Brian, was headed to get the mail, as we do every day, and he was walking down Chestnut Street. And a neighbor called out from the doorway that she had fallen and hurt herself, and she couldn't move. And he went over and attended to her, comforted her, called the ambulance, stayed with her through that process, helped her with some issues with the neighbors and her personal property, and made sure that police and ambulance were there to take care of her. So, I'm very proud of the employees we have here for the work that they do every day. But they are good people. And it wasn't, Brian did not hesitate. He was very confident about taking care of her. He was very comforting, and he was very concerned about her the entire time. And that is not something that was in his job description when he was hired. I said,
But it's in his
Did he call and
personality.
say he was gonna be late?
I happened to be walking my dog up Chestnut Street, and he said, Lori. And I said, that guy looks like Brian. What's he doing over there? So, I said, Brian, you've had an exciting day today. He goes, when they hired me, they said no day will be the same. And they were right. They were right.
I've had a couple
Good
people
for
come up
him.
and compliment our crew there.
Yeah.
They've done a
They've
really good job.
always been good.
I would say yes, the front,
Very cordial.
those staff and the town clerk's office are always very friendly
Yeah.
to everybody.
And helpful. Yeah,
Very, very much
I'm
so.
done.
You done?
you are. Move,
Not yet, the warrant.
that's what I'm gonna do.
Okay, good.
Move to, move the treasurer's warrant for January 23rd, 2025.
Second,
I have a first and a second, all in favor.
Move to adjourn.
second.
I have a first and second, all in favor. Boy, you're good at being a chair. You're all right. You've done it three or
She's
four